What's that? A weekend without any football games? Pitt's schedule is over. There's no Pitt football games. What are we ever going to do for the weekend? Oh, I don't know. How about Pitt basketball bounces back from its second loss of the season? How about the Pitt soccer team plays in the NCAA Tournament? The Pitt women's volleyball team plays in the NCAA Tournament. Pitt's bowl destination gets announced. This was not a quiet weekend at all. This was not a slow weekend at all. There was a ton of Pitt stuff going on this weekend, and we are going to do our best to recap all of it right here on the Morning Pitt to get your week started on a Monday. So why deal with any more preamble? Why try to set things up? This is the weekend recap. This is everything that happened over the weekend you need to know to get your week started. So let's dive into it here on the Morning Pitt on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Yeah, the Monday edition of the Morning Pitt, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Glad to be with you. Hope you had a great weekend. I know one way to make it better or to get a great start on your week, since, you know, Christmas is like, what's today? The 9th, so 16 days. It's about 2 weeks away. There's still time, though. If you want to get a gift for the Pitt fan in your life, go to homefieldapparel.com and use our promo code PIT24. 15% off your first order of the best Pitt gear you're going to find, and other schools, too. I've got my Evansville Aces t-shirt under here. See it? You can see it. It's pretty sweet. But it's a super sweet shirt. It's got a great logo. It's super comfortable. Aces is sort of my nod to volleyball, even though it's more about the Evansville basketball. Anyway, you can get a shirt like that or some of their awesome Pitt stuff at homefieldapparel.com. Use the promo code PIT24, PITT24, to get 15% off your first order. So where do we start with this weekend? I think we'll probably start on Sunday and work our way backward, because the news that came out yesterday, Pitt has its bowl destination. You see it up there at the top. Pitt will be spending Christmas in Detroit. That's got to be a song, right? Christmas in Detroit. Did somebody ever make a Jack White or somebody make a song like that? Christmas in Detroit. If they haven't, they should, because I can only imagine how much cheer there is in Detroit, Michigan over the Christmas holiday. But Pitt will be celebrating Christmas in Detroit for the Streets Ahead Bowl. It's not called the Streets Ahead Bowl. The Game Above Bowl. I actually don't mean to be disrespectful here. I've already forgotten the name of the bowl because it's a name that I haven't heard before. The Game Above Sports Bowl at Ford Field on Thursday, December 22nd at 2 o'clock kickoff for that game. It's going to be in the afternoon. I don't know what the TV assignment is, but it doesn't matter. We'll all find a way to watch Pitt take on Toledo. The Rockets, a 7-5 team out of the MAC. They beat Mississippi State on the road. Mississippi State won like 2 games all year. They had 2 other wins over bowl teams, bowl-eligible teams. It was they beat Miami of Ohio, who was 8-5, and they beat Northern Illinois, who was 8-5. Bowl-eligible wise, they lost to Western Kentucky, Buffalo, Bowling Green, and Ohio. They were the bye game for Mississippi State, but they won that game. Ultimately went 7-5 overall, 4-4 in the MAC. What is there to say? I mean, we could get into like the scouting report. We could talk about that. I mean, Toledo had a pretty prolific passing offense. I think they're the number 1 passing offense in the MAC this year. Tucker Gleason, the quarterback who transferred from Georgia Tech a couple years ago, threw 20-some touchdowns and 7 interceptions. 2 of his receivers, were first-team All-MAC selections. One guy, Juwan Newton, caught 64 passes for 949 yards and 11 touchdowns. Junior Vanderos caught 73 for 763 and 4. Those guys were productive. They were first-team All-Conference picks, like I said. Maxon Hook, who I believe is a safety for Toledo, had 100 tackles and a couple interceptions. He also was a first-team All-MAC option or selection, Statistically, Toledo had one of the tougher defenses in the MAC, at least numbers-wise. They were in the top 5 in the conference in run defense, pass defense, and scoring defense, but obviously they finished 7-5, so they had a few things go wrong along the way. Pitt, also at 7-5, also had a few things go wrong along the way. And, if you get predictions wrong as often as I do, if you are truly that bad at making predictions, as I am, and if you've watched these Morning Pitt episodes, if you've read the message board for any length of time, or read the 3-2-1 columns where I make a prediction, you would know that you're well familiar with how bad I am at making predictions. But this one I might actually have a chance to get right. Before the season, one of my most common refrains, I said it a lot of times, I probably wrote it a few times. I said it often enough that it felt like I was just sort of repeating myself at a certain point, and you might have felt that way too. But if you do feel that way, that's good, because that might mean you remember that I said that this Pitt team, this is my thought on them in August, felt like an 8-5 team. The team that would either go 8-4 and like 2016 and lose to a Big Ten team in a bowl game, or a team that would go 7-5 like the 2019 team. And I said, they would go 7-5 and beat Eastern Michigan and Detroit. Well, now the scenario is setting up for 7-5 and a chance to play Toledo in Detroit. The point being, I thought this would be a team that would end up at 8-4 and lose to a power conference team in a bowl, or 7-5 and beat a MAC team in a bowl. They're trending toward the latter. Now, of course, when the season got to 7-0 and Pitt was off to that start and all the good things were happening, I said, well, I was an idiot for saying they would go 8-5. But hey, here it is. So it's going much better. They still ended up at the place I expected them to be or predicted them to be. They just took the weirdest path to get there. They took the least likely path to get to 7-5 with the bowl game hanging out there. We'll talk about this a lot over the next, let's see, that game is 17 days away. But there are already people saying, why would I watch this? Why would I watch Pitt Toledo in Detroit? Why would I travel to Detroit to watch Pitt Toledo play? Why would anyone want to watch this game? And I understand. I'm not going to tell you don't go. I mean, look, Detroit's drivable. It's very easy to get there. It's a very drivable distance from Pittsburgh. And it's indoors too. It's not like you're going to sit outside. So you're not going to Yankee Stadium or someplace like that where the weather's a total crapshoot and you're going to sit outside in late December. It's indoors, so you got climate control. And I think Detroit on the whole is not a bad city. It's got its ups and downs, and certainly it's got its reputation. But I think it's probably a little bit better than its reputation would indicate. To the question of what does Pitt get out of this, or what can you as a fan hope to get out of it? I mean, I think what you look for is an opportunity to see something for next year. And it's funny, we talk so often of well, you don't even know, I don't even know what the roster is going to look like next year. And that's true. And I think even by the time we get to the bowl game, we may or may not know what the roster is going to look like. But all the guys who are going to leave, for the most part, will probably be gone by then. There'll be a handful who transfer after spring camp, like there were this past year. Dayon Hayes and Solomon DeShields all went after spring camp. A couple other guys as well. Christian Veyer, of course. But I think the majority of your transfers out are going to happen after the regular season ends, and and they'll be gone by the time you get to Christmas. And certainly the day after Christmas, when it's the 26th and you're playing this bowl game. So you'll have kind of thinned the roster a little bit. Guys you want to keep and guys you don't. You'll thin the roster. And I think for the most part, the guys who are on the team for this bowl game and the guys who get on the field for this bowl game, if they have eligibility remaining, I would say there's most likely chance that they're coming back next year. So it is an opportunity to see guys for next year. Maybe that's Eli Holstein coming back and being healthy again. Maybe it's a young receiver or a young defensive lineman or a young safety maybe gets an extra opportunity. Maybe Donovan McMillan and PJ O'Brien choose not to play in this game. In which case you're going to get Cruz Brookins and Jesse Anderson playing a lot out there with Javon McIntyre. And that's something to look forward to, I think. Maybe you get a little bit more Juelz Goff, and maybe he's a little bit further along than he was. And there are a lot of, there's a number of injury questions, guys who are up in the air. We'll see if Eli Holstein's available. We'll see if Desmond Reed is available. I would say Derek Davis, the injury he suffered looked severe enough that he's not going to be back anytime soon. But I think, there's a couple of guys you might be able to get back in this game and largely have a sense of at least the foundation of the roster. Now, obviously, pieces are going to be added, the offensive line chief among them. But I think a couple other key positions as well are going to be added to Pitt from the transfer portal. And so it's not 100% what your roster is going to look like. You'll be adding on top of it. You'll get a sense of the foundation of what this roster for 2025 is going to be built on. Because a lot of those seniors probably won't play. And obviously the transfers out are not going to play. And so a lot of guys you're not going to have on the roster next year are not going to be playing in this game, which gives you a chance to see a little bit more of the guys who will. And, you know, I don't think anybody's going to build a statue for Pitt beating Toledo if that's what the outcome of this game is on December 26th. I don't know if anybody's going to, you're not going to raise a banner for it or anything like that. But at this point for this team, after 5 losses in a row, any kind of glimmer of positivity I think is a good thing. And so if they could come out and beat Toledo, at least you get, your kick into the offseason is coming off a win at least. You've broken the losing streak. You're not going into 2025 on, God forbid, a 6-game losing streak. And so that opportunity is out there as well. No, this isn't the Peach Bowl against Michigan State. It's not a playoff game. It's not even the Sun Bowl against UCLA. Like, we recognize that. We acknowledge that. And I think Pitt acknowledges that. But that doesn't mean it's completely devoid of opportunities, devoid of things to watch for, things you would want to see, and things you would want to, observe. I think there's still value in this game. And at 2 o'clock on Thursday, December 26th, we'll all be sitting here watching it. And when the game ends, we'll be live afterward for the Panther-Lair post-game show right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. So you got that to look forward to. If nothing else, you have that to look forward to, the post-game show, our final football post-game show of the year, probably our final post-game show of the calendar year 2024. So that'll be something, right? That'll be something. All right, so that came out yesterday. Pitt's going to the I forgot the name again. The Game Above Sports Bowl at Ford Field in Detroit. So book your tickets now. Saturday was a big day. Three Pitt events going on Saturday. Your number 2 Pitt men's soccer team was taking on Vermont in the NCAA Tournament, I believe, quarterfinals. The Pitt women's volleyball team in the nightcap, the number 1 Pitt Panthers were taking on number 8 seed Oklahoma for a chance to advance to the regional semifinals. And your Pitt men's basketball team was at Virginia Tech for the oddball ACC opener, which will start there because the Panthers went down to Blacksburg and emerged victorious 64-59, a game where Virginia Tech led most of the game. Their largest lead, they had an 8-point lead at one point, but and had the lead up until the final minute. Virginia Tech's last lead was with about a minute left to go, but they were ahead for most of this game. I'm looking at the scoring runs, and Pitt had a lead for a brief stretch, maybe about 5 minutes or so in the first half. In the second half, it was really all Virginia Tech. I mean, Virginia Tech was up until the final 50 seconds, and Jalen Lowe made a layup in the final 50 seconds that put Pitt ahead 60-59, and Lowe ultimately closed it out with 4 free throws to make it 64-59. But Virginia Tech led for the first 19 minutes and 10 seconds of the second half. And it was that kind of game where I didn't know if Pitt was going to win. I was actually fairly concerned that Pitt would not win for a good portion of that game because just nothing was falling. The shots just weren't going down. And there's a number of issues for this Pitt team right now as they finally wrap up their 5-game stretch of playing away from home, the Greenbrier tournament, and then the games at Ohio State, Mississippi State, and Virginia Tech. As we know, Pitt came out of that 5-game stretch with a 3-2 record. Not a bad performance in 5 games away from home. I think 4-1 would have been the ideal. I think that's what most fans were hoping for. 3-2 was was probably the baseline of what was acceptable. 2-3 would be pretty disappointing, and obviously 1-4 or 0-5 would be downright bad. I think 3-2 was baseline acceptable. Not as good as you would hoped it would be, or as good as you had hoped it would be, but acceptable. And I think, you probably start right there. As we talk about this team and where they're at right now, we talk about where they've been. And I think that's an important point to emphasize, that they've been away from home for a long time. A long time. Pitt has been on the road. And I don't think it's unimportant to mention that. They played the LSU game. I'm trying to bring up the calendar here. On the 22nd. So their last home game was December 18th, right? They played the LSU game, the first game away from home, on November 22nd. So, today's the 8th. Yesterday, yesterday was the 8th. Saturday was the 7th. So how long are you looking at there? 15 days of games on the road, away from home. 2 weeks of basketball straight where you're playing away from home. And that doesn't excuse everything. There are things that Pitt should have done better in all 5 of those games, certainly in the 2 losses. But that's a long time to be away from home at this point in the season. You're going to get into stretches where you play a couple of games in a row on the road in like February, or January. But never 5 in a row. Never a 2-week stretch that you don't have a game in your home gym. And, until you get into the actual postseason play, when every game is played away from your home gym. I think this was a real test for this team. And while I think they obviously have experienced players who came back, all the guards, the top 3 guards are really experienced. The centers and the forwards are all, you have a lot of experience on this team. But going away from home for that long at this point in the schedule, I think it's tough. I think it's tough, and I think it came through in some of their play. Now, that doesn't excuse some of the issues that exist. Post defense continues to be an issue, and I don't know if there's a good answer there. I know everybody wants to put Guillermo Diaz-Graham back at center and play Zach Austin at the 4 and split time between Guillermo Diaz-Graham and Cam Corrin. Fine. I'm not sure if that really helps your defense all that much. There are concerns with this offense. We'll talk about it in a second. But the concerns with the offense are a little bit less because I think there are a number of reasons why and ways how they will work themselves out, those issues on offense. Defensively, I'm a little more concerned, particularly when it comes to the post. Mississippi State was able to do everything they wanted to do. And some of that was the physicality, some of that was just the situation, some of that was the matchup, whatever it might be. But Pitt is pretty lacking when it comes to a defensive presence in the post. I don't think Cam Corrin has lived up to what they hoped he would be able to do defensively. I think they knew it would be a different kind of defense than what Federico offered. There wouldn't be that rim protection, but I think they were hoping for Corrin to be more physical and strong down low and be able to defend that way and make more of an impact there, but that hasn't really happened. I just don't know if Guillermo Diaz-Graham going in changes the equation all that much. Papa Amadou Kanti, who obviously had a huge game against Ohio State and has seen his minutes go up since then. I think he played less against Virginia Tech than he had in the Mississippi State game. Where's my box score? Conti only played 2 minutes against Virginia Tech. So not as much time there as you were expecting after the Ohio State game. But I just don't know if a good answer for the defensive issues in the post is on the roster right now. I think they're going to have to make do with what they have. They're going to have to hope for improvement from those guys, and they're going to have to adjust the way they play in order to account for it. Now, I do think the scoring in the offense will come around. This team is just not shooting well right now. They are just not shooting well. In this 5-game stretch away from home, they were particularly bad. 27% from 3, 35 out of 125. In the 2 losses, they were even worse than that, 26.5% from 3. And some of it is the guys who are taking the most shots. Like the 3 most 3-point attempts on the roster right now are Jalen Lowe. He's attempted 53. Ishmael Leggett has attempted 44. And Guillermo Diaz-Graham has attempted 42. Not one of those guys is shooting better than 30%. And actually, Diaz-Graham is shooting 21% right now. Jalen Lowe did really well against LSU and Mississippi State. He made 8 out of 16. That's awesome. In the other 3 games during this road trip, he was 2 of 17. He made 2 3-pointers. in those other games. Ishmael Leggett, over the course of the 5-game trip that they were just on, 5 of 27 from 3. It's less than 20%. Guillermo Diaz-Graham, on the 5-game road trip they were just on, 2 of 20 from 3. Like that, this is such a big part of the problem right now is the shooting. And it's not the only problem. And again, some of this stuff is about the challenges of going on the road like they did at the point in the schedule where they did. And again, post issues. We know that. But this team simply has to shoot better. Now, I believe Jalen Lowe is better than a 28.3% three-point shooter. I believe Ishmael Leggett is better than a 29.5% three-point shooter. I believe Guillermo Diaz-Graham is better than a 21.4% three-point shooter. But these guys have to show it. Like, they have to do it. They can't, they can't keep firing up shots and just like, well, it'll work itself out. It'll work itself out. It's not working itself out. You're 10 games in now. You're a third of the way through the regular season schedule. And these shooting issues, particularly for Lowe and Diaz-Graham, are not resolving themselves. They're not getting better. I mean, and it's not just that they're shooting poorly in the season. Like I said, they're not getting better. Diaz-Graham made 2 3-pointers on this 5-game stretch. That's not going to cut it. Not with the volume he shoots. And I don't think the issue is with the volume. I think he should keep shooting because he's taking good shots. And I know there's some concern about the types of shots he's getting when he's playing from the 4 as opposed to what he was getting when he was playing with the 5 last year. And maybe there's something to that. Maybe they need to use him differently to give him better looks. But I mean, damn, he's getting open looks. It's not like, boy, he's getting contested every time. And he's got the height, which gives him an advantage in terms of being able to see the basket. But not even with the height. He's getting open shots. And he's just not making them. Now, I don't know why that is. I'm not smart enough to say if there's something changed with his shot or if there's some issue that way or whatever. He's just not making his shots. And they need Guillermo Diaz-Graham to make his shots because he's one of the big 3-point shooters on this team, along with Jalen Lowe, who needs to make his shots. I feel like Lowe has gotten better, or I felt like Lowe had gotten better, and then I looked at what he did in the 3 games that were not LSU and Mississippi State on this 5-game road trip, where he was like 2 of 17. So maybe he hasn't gotten better, but Jalen Lowe is one of the least of my concerns right now. I think when you talk about this team and you talk about their offense, he's probably the least. Same with Ishmael Leggett. He had a rough couple of games to end the road trip, but not worried about that. Zach Austin, I think, has been a bit of a revelation this year. I think he's playing better than he did last year. He is, I think, fourth on the team, in 3-point attempts, and he's made 15, which ties for the most on the team. He ties Jalen Lowe. They've both made 15 3-pointers, but Austin has taken 16 fewer attempts. He's shooting better than 40%. Same with Damian Dunn. Before he left, he was 10 of 19 before he got hurt, 52.6%. So there are guys shooting well, and I think they need to keep feeding Austin. He keeps knocking shots down, but you need your big guys, your heavy hitters, to shoot better. Lowe, Leggett, and Guillermo have to shoot better than they have. Now, you're going to come home. You're going to be back at the Peterson Events Center. You're going to be, taking on a couple non-conference teams that you should be able to beat pretty comfortably. This should be a nice reset before the calendar changes and they open, full-blown ACC play to start 2025. They should have a nice little reset here. And maybe things will look much better when they get back to the Peterson Event Center. But I got to be honest. I mean, with that game on Saturday, wasn't entirely comfortable with how they played. Obviously they got the win, and maybe at the end of a 5-game, road trip like that, you're just hoping to get the win and go home and take a nap. Like you're just hoping to get out of it with a win by any means necessary. You're not worried about how you look, and I understand that. But I would have liked to have seen more intense bounce back from the Mississippi State game and a more effective bounce back from the Mississippi State game. All right, the other things on Saturday, Pitt soccer, the men lost to Vermont 2-0. Vermont had 2 shots on goal, and they both went in. Pitt had 6 shots on goal and missed all of them. And just kind of that sort of season, or just sort of that kind of game to end the Panthers season, what ended up being one of the best seasons in school history. Jay Vidovich, ACC Coach of the Year, has done an incredible job with that program, and they are legitimately one of the top teams in the conference and one of the top teams in the nation, which they were all season. Ranked number 1, entered the NCAA tournament ranked number 2, but end up or they entered as a 2 seed, I should say, but they got bounced by Vermont. It happens, and but a heck of a season though, a heck of a season. I probably didn't give as much attention to the Pitt men's soccer team as I should have. They definitely merited it with the season they had here. Volleyball keep playing, though, as the Panthers swept Oklahoma on Saturday night, the nightcap of that big day of Pitt stuff. On Friday, they beat Morehead State with a 3-0 sweep, and then on Saturday night, they swept Oklahoma. And it's funny because the match with Oklahoma, it was a sweep, but a bunch of those sets were really competitive and really close. They had to go to 28-26 for the first set. I think the second set was 25-21, and then 25-19 for the third set. Created a little separation there in the third set, but it was, Oklahoma was defending really well against Olivia Babcock, and Pitt had to fight for it. But then at the end of the day, they still got the sweep. So even though Oklahoma pushed them, Pitt still didn't lose a set. It was pretty remarkable what this team has been able to do. Now they'll take on Oregon on Thursday, I think Thursday afternoon, at the Peterson Event Center for the regional semifinals, and see where it goes from there. But it's definitely been fun to watch. I feel like now, after we got past this first weekend of games, I think all the games are on ESPN or ESPNU or ESPN2 or even ABC, so you should be able to watch them. If you didn't get ESPN Plus for the broadcasts over the weekend, you should be able to catch these matches later in the week. I highly recommend it. It's fun to watch. It's a lot of fun to watch. It's fun to watch. Olivia Babcock and Tori Stafford killing people with their with their big hits at the net, and then obviously the blocking, and then it's pretty fun to watch Rachel Fairbanks with the sets and the assists because she's just an absolute magician out there. It's a fun team to watch. They're having a lot of success, and I think this team is on a path to a national championship. And so keep an eye on that. We'll be talking about it later in the week for sure, as we talk about everything. Just because the regular season is over, it doesn't mean coverage drops off at Panther-Lair.com or right here on YouTube.com/Panther-Lair.com. There's always basketball to talk about. There's going to be recruiting to talk about, transfers to talk about, volleyball to talk about, bowl game to talk about. We got a lot to talk about. So make sure you like this video and subscribe to YouTube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Get all of the Pitt video content you can possibly handle, and then the website right there, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. Thanks so much for tuning in today. I hope you had a great weekend. Most of the weekend went pretty well for you. Pitt basketball win, Pitt volleyball win, Pitt soccer not so much, but it was a great season nonetheless. And the game above sports bowl. So got that. Pitt Toledo, December 26th. All right, like and subscribe. I hope you had a great weekend. I hope you have a great Monday, and we'll be back to talk more Pitt sports with you tomorrow on the Morning Pitt right here on YouTube.com/Panther-Lair.com.